Welcome to the show Gold Squadron Gays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays talk about and review their favorite Star Wars content while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and I don't remember how to cover a TV show.
That's because this isn't a TV show, this is a lifestyle.
It's truly it is at this point. Truly it is. Yeah, well, it's been a while because we did what, Ahsoka,
Yeah.
And then we did, but Visions, our coverage has been slightly different. So for context, listeners, if you're listening to this episode when it comes out, at the time we're recording this, The Elder just came out. So we went straight from recording Visions to recording this, even though you all got a break for a week to listen to us be wrong about the Bad Batch.
You say we're wrong. However...
Oh, for fuck's sake. For fuck's sake, Bradley. Are you ever going to let this go?
That wrong. We were pretty decent. I mean, yes, I will give you this first episode and the second episode. We were pretty wrong about the first three being just on Tantiss, but we were half right, basically.
We were. I mean, effectively, it was this weird trilogy with like this other random episode in the middle.
Sure.
Like we'll get to it when we get to episode 2. At time of recording, I think 12 episodes have come out of the 15.
Ish. Yeah, I think we only have 3 left.
I think we only have 3 left.
Yeah.
So
we don't know what happens in the finale.
Yeah, I think that by the time this episode comes out, it either is finale week or it's just been finale week. But we don't know. We kind of know where the season is going at time of recording, but for various back-end reasons, we're recording these episodes again massively early.
Right. And yeah, I think the finale is this week, so we're like really excited for it. And we can't wait to see all the great stuff.
Or we watched the finale and we thought it was amazing. 10 out of 10, no notes.
Right.
I joke, but I do think this episode might be a 10 out of 10 no notes for me.
I think so.
This one and the third episode, Shadows of Tantiss. Shadows of Tantiss, I'm going to be an unhinged gremlin when I get to Shadows of Tantiss because I fucking loved that episode.
Oh, okay.
I've actually liked it's been nice, and I've been talking to you about this, Bradley.
Right.
Most of the episodes in season 3, all of the episodes have been at minimum good.
Correct. Yeah, there's not been a true, I think, of a stinker of an episode. Like every one of has been either just okay or it's been good. Like it's never been like bad, like a certain episode we will never name again. And
oh, we're gonna name it next week, but yes. Oh Lord, no, all of them have been like I've been watching week to week, and there's certain episodes that I've watched and I've been like, yeah, I mean that didn't really do anything major for the plot, but it was a nice character moment, or it was fun, or it was enjoyable. There's none that I've been like, this is terribly made. Who authorized this? There's been some little like issues. We'll get to them, particularly when we get to the Fennec Shand episode. Spoilers for the Bad Batch, but Fennec Shand does turn up, and there's a major problem with her episode. But we'll get to it when we get to it. But even that episode, I was like, this is really fun. I wish I could see the fun that were happening. But yeah, we'll get to that. That's coming. I don't think we have any Star Wars news, or if we did, it wouldn't be relevant 3.5 weeks later.
I mean, as of this recording, there is no modern updated news because we're almost, well, I guess whenever this comes out, it'll be almost May the 4th. So I guess
it'll almost be May the 4th. I have my tickets to see The Phantom Menace in theaters with the Acolyte preview. I'm not doing the marathon. I am doing The Phantom Menace instead.
Oh, so, yeah, I heard about that. There was, they said they were going to do a marathon. And I was like,
all 9.
How could you do all 9 though? It's more than 24 hours. So how is that possible?
No, it's 22 hours.
Yeah, but with breaks and stuff, I mean,
they're not doing break. They're just
gonna show it, and then you can get up if you want to get up. I guess if you want to wear a diaper, you can wear a diaper. It's like up to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrible.
If I was still in college, right? If I didn't have my personal responsibilities, if I didn't have my professional responsibilities, if I wasn't juggling trying to manage the production of, we're now on 4 different books happening simultaneously, if you're counting the one that's out and being marketed. If I didn't have this podcast, then yeah, I would be sat for 22 hours of Star Wars. I would do it, but I can't because I have all of those things that I have to do with my life.
I have no responsibilities. I'm going to go to the theater and I'm going to just only eat popcorn for 22 hours and drink soda.
Oh, 100%. Like I would accurately recreate my brother's experience of watching Attack of the Clones for the first time in theaters, which is eat too much popcorn and then become ill halfway through the movie and have to leave.
That's pretty iconic, actually.
And before, and I remember specifically, it was before the Django and Obi-Wan fight in the rain. And so mom goes out to like be with him in the bathroom. They leave me. I'm like 13 or something.
Right.
They leave me alone in the theater to watch this movie. So I watched the movie, the whole movie, by myself, and none of them did. And it was like a week before my brother recovered enough. So that was my first experience with containing spoilers and being burdened with secret knowledge. Because for a whole week, I was the only person in my house that knew the plot of the back half of Attack of the Clones.
Oh, that's so funny.
That was a long tangent and digression about
The Phantom
my
Menace.
history of The Phantom Menace. But I'm going to see The Phantom Menace, which I never saw in theaters, so I'm going to see it in theaters.
I think I
Then
was
I'm
too
going
young
to Star Wars
remember
Night
it.
2 days later.
I think I'm just too young to remember when I went and saw it because I'm pretty sure I saw it.
I did not. I didn't see it till it came to VHS because it was during the holidays and we were so busy all the time that we just never went to go see the movie.
I mean, I feel like I had to because like literally the only memory I have of Phantom Menace is that I begged my father to find me Anakin's pod racer helmet so I could be Anakin pod racer for Halloween that year, which I was.
He
And
was. I've seen the pictures.
he did find that helmet and it was very expensive because it was like I think it was just like it wasn't a Halloween costume helmet, like it was like an actual replica that you could buy at like Hot Topic or something. And like I
Oh,
swear to
that's so
God,
funny.
he had to find it and like he did and it cost like almost $200 something like that. And I remember that so vividly. And then my dad, like once I wore it for Halloween, he like wouldn't let me touch it. Like he put it up in like the closet so I wouldn't ever break it because it was so expensive. And I just
Wow.
but then I don't know whatever happened to it because I'm like, shit, I wish I still had that thing. That would be iconic.
Yeah, I know that mom has like a handful of like Star Wars action figures and stuff from like the 1990s that she's kept in a box.
Sure.
That the idea is that, like, you know,
It's worth
eventually
something
my
someday.
brother and I can sell it.
Right.
Like an insurance policy is like eventually we can have this and sell it.
Yeah.
Like I
That
know
never
that's
works,
somewhere.
guys. Open up your Barbies, play with your Star Wars toys. Like, just don't save anything. Who cares?
Anyway, The Phantom Menace, I'm going to be seeing it probably around the same time you're listening to this episode. And then I'm going to be going to Star Wars Night for the first time.
I love it.
Yes, I'm very excited to not have to go to work for 2 days. Star Wars Night a little less so, but most importantly, the excuse to not go to work and to actually take PTO. Speaking of not having any PTO for 5 months
And
because
being
I'm
confined
insane
to your
and
work.
being confined to my cubicle, what are we talking about today, Bradley?
Today we're talking about The Bad Batch Season 3, Episode 1, titled Confined, where imprisoned on Tantiss, Omega adjusts to a new life. Charles, what is one thing you liked about this episode and one thing you did not?
The pacing of this episode was flawless. Like, I understand that every shot costs however many hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so there's an impetus to, like, put everything on screen all at once.
Sure.
But I loved the long, slow tracking shots, or, like, the shots where, like, it's just the empty hallway. Like, just reinforcing just how eerie Tantiss actually is to be inside. One thing I did not like, this is a hard one. I can't think of a single thing. Like, yeah, I can't think of a single thing. Because I was gonna say, like, well, Omega never mentions the batch at all, but then I remember Crosshair does mention it, and they do have like, the fact that she didn't mention it is them as a point. Like, she's deliberately not mentioning the Bad Batch, but then she's projecting them on the Crosshair, and I'm like, oh, that's really good, actually. Like, no, I think this genuinely, like, on its own, even as like a short film, this was absolutely incredible. And even like the stuff that they had that was clearly just set up for other stuff, all of it was very quick. It moved by so fast. There was like a couple of points when I was watching and take my notes that I had to like jump back because I was like, I wanted to confirm that I didn't imagine a line. It was great. What about you, Bradley? One thing you liked and one thing you did not.
One thing I liked about this episode was, I think, yeah, just it felt like a movie, I think, almost. Like, I felt like I was watching The Bad Batch, the movie. Like, I don't know why. It had that movie quality to it. Like, I was like, oh, we're just going to keep going. Like, this is going to be a 2 hour thing. Like, I'm just going to watch a full 2 hours of Bad Batch. And
We thought
it's
it was going to
nonstop.
be this. Like, we
Right.
thought it was going to be this for 3 episodes. We were wrong, but
Right.
I thought
And,
for the
yeah.
first episode that we were going to be right about that.
Right. Yeah, they fucked us over in the second one, but they saved it in the third one. But and I will say the thing I did not like about this episode was that the third episode was not the second episode. So that's what I
Yes,
did
we'll
not
get
like
we'll
about
get to
this.
that. We'll get to that when we get to it. I have promised to explain to Bradley why I think the second episode is where it is. Especially now that we have more of the season and we have more context.
Sure. However, I still would have loved if you just mashed up 1 and 3 in one super long episode. I would have really loved like that would if they had done that, I genuinely would say that this Confined and Shadows of Tantis would like combined episode would have been like my favorite episode of the show in its entirety.
I do think Shadows of Tantis might be my current favorite episode of the show. Sorry to Harbinger, but I do think that that Shadows of Tantis, the third episode, might be my favorite of the show, but we'll get to it when we get to it. All right. Well, I didn't have as many notes as I thought, but we did then talk for 10 minutes about the Phantom Menace at the beginning and movie premieres.
There you go. It'll make up
So,
the time.
Let's, rather like Omega just sort of killing time, let's dive into this. Are you starting at the beginning? Because I have one note at the beginning of the episode, like before we even get into the episode.
Oh, okay. What's your note before we even get into the episode?
I noticed, and this is just for me to bring up, I did notice that they had a shot of the Zillo Beast in the recap.
We should talk about the recap for a second. Yeah.
Yeah, they have the clone Zilla Beast.
Okay.
And then they have like the conversation between Crosshair and Cody.
Right.
Like they put a lot of emphasis on Cody, which is interesting.
Hmm.
I don't know. I think the recap is very interesting on a re-listen.
You know what? I guess I didn't watch it all the way through to like be like, again, because I mean, obviously I watched it the first time, but like on the rewatch, I don't think I watched the recap again. But yeah, I mean, they just highlight the big points. Did they do stuff in season 1? Did they put stuff from season 1 in there?
Yeah,
okay,
they put some stuff from season 1 in there.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's probably important. And then, I mean, I love how they just love to throw in that image of Tech falling just to hit home.
They do Tech falling twice. They do his voice at the beginning and then they repeat the same thing at the end, which is weird because so Tech's almost never brought up in this season directly. They don't talk about him. It's more that his absence is felt. We'll get to it when we get to the episode 5, the episode where they're on the base, the Imperial base, and they're like fighting the Dune sandworms or whatever. We'll talk about like the absence of Tech being felt in this, but the recap really hits that Tech death, quote unquote.
Right.
We don't actually know at time of recording if he's going to be one of the CX clones, but that's the most popular theory at the moment is he's one of the CX clones. Anyway, Bradley, you want to finally bring us into the episode? God, we think we'd be better at this by now.
Section 1. An Imperial shuttle approaching the Tantiss base crashes after being struck by light. Surviving the crash, a trooper tries to contact the base, and Dr. Hemlock hears the stormtroopers struggle over the comm, but decides against sending reinforcements, considering them lost outside the base perimeter. Later that morning, Emery Carr visits Omega in her cell and has her follow along for the daily tasks ahead. Omega passes by an imprisoned former clone troopers, including Crosshair, and witnesses Emery collecting a blood sample from a trooper, leading Omega to reluctantly agree to a similar blood collection, and when asking Emery about her time on Camino, Omega learns that she was sent elsewhere before being taken by Dr. Hemlock, comparing Nala Se's recognition of potential in Omega. She leaves to deliver the blood samples to Nala Se in the lab.
So I did note here one thing that's interesting that was pointed out to me about the clones in the crashing shuttle. Not the clones, actually, very specifically not the clones.
The non-clones, yes.
I have clones in my notes, but I'm wrong here. This is the thing Charles fucked up live on the air. The stormtroopers and the pilot have American accents.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
They do not have the clone accents. They have the stormtrooper accents.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I knew they were stormtroopers. I didn't catch the stormtrooper accent, I guess.
Yeah, it's a little subtle thing is that the stormtroopers tend to have American accents. Officers tend to have British accents.
Right.
Clones have that New Zealand accent, but not these troopers. So I thought it would be a good time very quickly because the cast list for this episode is basically a roundup of all of the major cast members that are going to be in the entire season.
Sure.
So real fast, we're not going to run down everybody again, but just as a reminder who's playing who in this season. We have D. Bradley Baker playing fucking every clone ever, including all of the Bad Batch, the clone troopers, one of the stormtroopers in this scene, and another surprise voice that we will get to later. We have Michelle Ong returning as Omega. Jimmy Simpson is playing Dr. Royce Hemlock, as well as, again, one of the other stormtroopers in this scene. We have Keisha Castle Hughes as Emery Carr. Remember, Keisha Castle Hughes was the unspeaking queen in Padme's funeral in Revenge of the Sith. My favorite fun fact about the casting of the show. Resistance veteran Jonathan Lapal as the another one of the stormtroopers in the scene, and also he's the droid. He does a bunch of voices in this show, and those are the main people. In this episode, we also see the return of Gwendolyn Yo as Nala Se. She's only really going to be in a handful of episodes, but she's on this cast list that I'm reading. So thought it would be a fun time to remind everybody this is who's voicing who. And you can go back to their first appearance episodes for us, where we go over all of these people and their resumes. That's who's voicing. This episode is basically who's who of the cast of the
cast
show.
of the season. Yeah.
The only main character that's really missing is Sid, and also Fee,
Right.
Genoa. And we'll get to at least one of those people as the season progresses.
Yeah, well, and I'll just get into like plot wise. I wanted to bring up the fact that so when I was doing my notes for this, originally I was in the mindset of doing like the teaser, right? Like because we've been doing Ahsoka, and in Ahsoka, you know, they do the little teaser and then it's the title card, and that's usually our first section of every single episode. But I forgot that with Bad Batch, they give you the title card before the episode even starts, and then it just keeps going. And I was like, wait, when is the teaser supposed to stop? And it never stopped. And I was like, oh, that's because that's not how these episodes are broken down.
They're just short films essentially.
Yeah.
And I do think that I like more when a title card for something is up front. I will say that. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, there was this, I can't ever explicitly confirm it was because of The Dark Knight, but I think it was because of The Dark Knight, that there was this wave of movies who would put their title card at the end of the movie. And I hate that.
Oh, that's stupid.
I truly despise that. It needs to go at the top of the movie.
I agree. I actually, you know what I really like? I like the way that, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I like the way Invincible does it.
I've seen one episode of Invincible. My best friend is insisting that I watch it, but I have a watch list a mile long. So
I love the way they do the Invincible one, because they do the teaser like a normal teaser. The show just starts and it's a normal teaser, and then one of the characters randomly is going to say Invincible, but then they cut them off before they say Invincible, and then they put the title screen up that says Invincible.
Oh,
so
that's funny.
It's so good. That's like my favorite joke in the show, is that they always do that, and I always found a creative way to do it. So I like that. But I do agree. I like that they put the title card at the beginning of each of these episodes, only for the sheer fact it's like with Bad Batch, at least we don't ever know what like the next episode is going to be with Bad Batch. So like they don't necessarily tell you all the title. I think in the beginning they didn't tell us all the titles, but
they did. For this season they did.
No, this
previous
season
seasons
they
have not.
No.
This season they released all 15 when they I think dropped the trailer. They announced all 15, which is very unusual for them.
Right.
Normally it's like the first 8 episodes or something, like the ones that get sent out to critics.
Right.
Like real critics, not us.
Yeah. Thanks for
Thanks,
not sending us Bad Batch season 3. But no, like
not that we would have gotten to it until now anyway.
Sure, but like even though like Ahsoka, like when those came out, like obviously it was just episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever, or part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Part 1, part 2, because that has a ridiculous title naming. The whole episode 1, part 1, words.
But I love how they always revealed it in Ahsoka. Like it was like, what's the title going to be this week? And then they would reveal it right as you're watching it. So it was really cool.
Mandalorian did that too. It's such a Book of Boba Fett. This has kind of been like a Mandoverse thing, is they won't tell us the name of the episode
for spoiler reasons, I guess.
For spoiler reasons, I don't know.
But yeah, anyway, this is cool. I did think that this teaser, technically, I would say that if this show had a teaser, it would just be the Imperial shuttle crashing, and
it would be the Imperial shuttle crashing. Yeah. Which, by the way, I do want to point out with this crash, and I do want to point out with this scene. My God, the animation has stepped up this season.
Yeah, it's like I don't even think it's the same show anymore. Like that's why I'm like watching it like, ooh, like this, I can't wait for whatever comes after this show, because like if they're this good right now with the animation, I feel like the next animated things are going to be top tier.
Whatever they're doing, like I'm thinking about the shot of the Tales of the Empire trailer where Morgan like grabs a handful of dirt and then like punches the ground.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, you want to joke about, you want to talk about the water in Avatar 2? No, I'm talking about the gravel in Tales of the Empire.
I'm talking about the fucking dirt in Tales of the Empire. I'm talking about the rain.
Right.
The goddamn rain in Bad Batch. This is the opening scene. And it's already like, Jesus fucking Christ.
So good.
They have gotten so good. But this has always been like Lucas Animation's their thing, right? Sure. They want to push these boundaries. Like they wrote entirely new programs for Clone Wars just so that they could do like bugs on the trees in one planet. Like they're constantly pushing like what you can actually do. And this season looks incredible. Like, and also just the direction, the like the lighting and how it's all set up, and it's done so intentionally, like with purpose. Because that's the thing. Animation, unlike live action, you don't have things that just sort of happen that you don't have to think about. Every single thing in an animated shot has to be considered. So it is absolutely incredible how detail-oriented, how tight this episode is. My next note, and it will be a trend throughout both this episode and the season, is wow, Hemlock sucks.
Yeah, he has like I like how he's consistent, first of all,
He
and
is
how bad he
very
is.
consistent.
He's just like, if you're gonna be a villain, at least be a consistent villain, and he is definitely consistent. He doesn't like waver in his thought process. He doesn't like think like, oh well, I'm gonna be a little nicer here, a little meaner there. No, he's just like, nah, fuck those stormtroopers. Like they're dead. Like why even bother? Like it's a waste of resources.
We'll get to it. This is interesting to bring up in the context of like the scene he has both with Nala Se outside the vault, and then the scene he has with Omega after Omega frees Batcher. Because I think the thesis statement of this entire episode is that scene with Dr. Carr, Dr. Hemlock, and Omega in the pens after Omega has let Batcher go. Because everything in this is showing us either Omega's like morality, her idealism, her drive to want to help people, versus Hemlock viewing people as completely disposable, that they're tools for him to use. Just like these stormtroopers, that he's just like, fuck them, who cares? They're beyond the perimeter. Meh.
And I also think that this scene was even just to set up the fact that of the Lurka Hounds, like it was really just setting up the use of them, like what they're even for, and like
oh yeah, setups and payoffs. Setups and payoffs, baby. I love covering the show with setups and payoffs because then I can go, that's a setup that's gonna pay off later in this episode.
right.
It's good writing. Speaking of things that I fucking love in this episode, can we talk about the motif of the dripping faucet for a minute?
Okay.
And how, one, this faucet has to be mad. This has to make Omega fucking insane.
Right.
But two, she's there, spoilers for the show, damn near 6 months.
Right.
They never fix this faucet. It is dripping the whole time. And it's this one noise like that drips into the silence of the room.
Right.
Rather like Omega herself is this one noise like dripping into the silence of Tantiss. I love this goddamn episode. This episode, honestly, it fucked my viewing of the whole season because it's so good. If Shadows of Tantiss hadn't been even better, I would be much more critical of the whole season because I'm like, you never topped that first episode, but they did somehow. And then they kept topping it too. We will get to Identity Crisis when we get to Identity Crisis. Because I have a lot to say about Identity Crisis.
I'm glad we don't talk about these like where we do them deep dives, because imagine if we were just like all we did was just one episode per season and we were just like let's just talk about the whole season as a whole thing. Like we would never
we would never be able to do this. We would never be able to do that.
We'd be jumping around from episode to episode, be like, well, in episode 8, well that it's episode 6, but
well, we kind of do for a recap, but then by then we've done the entire thing.
Yeah, then it's okay.
All right, so I've gotten some questions and I've made some comments to the effect of whether or not we will be bringing back fan favorite segment, Whose Goddamn White Baby Is That? The part of the show where I watch The Bad Batch on my HD TV in the dark and I tell you how bad the skin pigmentation is on the characters relative to what it should be given who they're clones of. I am pleased to report that this season they have gotten a lot better. That Omega is in particular is quite noticeably darker, especially when we get to Pabu. She's quite noticeably darker than she was in earlier seasons. Like, it's bizarre to watch the recap because you're like, wow, she is so fucking white in the recap. And you watch this season like, oh, okay, she is closer to like Tamara Morrison's live action skin tone than she was when we started. I bring this up for this scene specifically because I have an issue with this scene specifically, and that is that Emery, who is also supposed to be a clone, is noticeably several shades darker than Omega is.
Right.
Like, it's very clear. They haven't explicitly said, I think, that Emery Carr is a clone of Jango Fett. I don't think they've said that specifically. Right. I also have some questions about timeline, and again, we'll get into them with with Identity Crisis because I feel like we might have the answer by then. But as far as we know right now, these are supposed to be clones of the same person. Omega is darker than she used to be, but she's not as dark as Emery.
Right. I feel
And
like
we do
Emery's
have
more
to
of a
point that
true
out.
clone. Like, I know they're all clones, but like in the sense that like she's closer to the models of the actual like standard clones. Like,
Right.
yeah,
She's closer to what we would think a female clone would look
would
like.
look like, right?
Omega's, yeah, and Omega's supposed to be like an unaltered clone of Jango Fett, but like, yeah, you're right. Emery looks closer to what I'd imagine like do a female clone of Jango Fett would actually look like.
Right, because the way I think of Omega, I think of her more as like like a sister or a sibling of Jango, not a clone of Jango, right? Like so she's not. I mean, I know that physically, like they've explained that she is a actual clone, but it's also like she seems to be more of a genetic sibling, not an actual clone. That's my only explanation of why she looks either a slightly
Why
whiter
the fuck does
or
she
she's
have
just different.
blonde hair? This is what I want to know.
Well, doesn't Rex have
Like,
blonde hair?
beyond even the skin tone, Rex does have blonde. I keep forgetting Rex has blonde hair.
But he's like the only one, right?
He's the only one. He didn't dye it. I think Rex just does have blonde hair.
He's
Why
going through a
does Rex
phase.
have blonde hair? Why is Rex going through a phase constant? Well,
Going
because
through a gay phase.
well, because he works for Anakin goddamn Skywalker. That's why he's
Right.
going through a stressed out phase constantly.
Right.
So we will not be doing whose goddamn white baby is that every episode, but I will be calling it when I see it. There are some points
Sure.
later on where we need to have conversations about this clone skin tones relative to each other. We're not going to do it every single episode, mostly because it has gotten better, and also I would just be spinning wheels at that point. I'll bring it up when it's relevant
Sure.
to the show. Like in this case, where Emery is several shades darker than Omega. So
I like it.
we're making progress, but we're not quite there yet. Speaking of Emery, I have a question, Bradley.
Yes.
Did you notice any male doctors on Tantiss?
There was one right behind her, I think. Like in
Where?
this scene where when she's collecting Omega's blood, there is another doctor who's looking at another clone behind her. And I think it's a male. Don't
See,
quote me on this.
I just saw female doctors with different hairstyles.
Oh, okay, so maybe it's a female doctor. I thought it was just a
I
male
was looking.
doctor.
I was like, do we see a clear like male doctor on Tantiss that's not Hemlock? And I think no.
I need
I
to
think
now I need
all
to go
of the-
back and rewatch it again.
Now you need to go back and rewatch it because I think all of the medical staff that we see in this episode on Tantiss, besides Dr. Hemlock, are women.
And Emery, as far as we know, is the only clone doctor, right?
Emery, as far as we know, is the only clone doctor. She's like, she mentions in this scene actually that she was like Dr. Hemlock's protege.
Right.
So she's like, she's not quite his second in command, but she's very high up in the hierarchy. Because I think that other doctor that we saw at the end of season, was it the end of season 1?
I know what you're talking about. It
End
was
of
just a
1.
random doctor, right?
Yeah, it was this like random doctor that we saw on
Random woman doctor.
Tantiss, voiced by Helen Sadler, I think.
Mm.
Yeah, because that person was just like a random doctor.
Right.
It was just kind of there. I wonder, because we thought maybe Dr. Pershing worked at this facility, but we haven't seen him. And in fact, I don't think we've even seen any medical staff that are men, with the exception of Hemlock himself. That was just something I observed while watching.
I do want to talk about Emery a little bit more about her, because she brings up being on Camino, and then Omega's like, well, I never saw you on Camino.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, but how long has Emery been on, like, you know what I mean? Like, how
old is Emery Carr? Is she genetically modified
yeah,
to advance
or not?
This is the question that I had, especially when I really want to talk about it when we get to Identity Crisis and we get the revelation of like why, like what was going on with her being sent away, or at least they allude to it more, because she just mentioned she was sent elsewhere. And it clearly has to predate Omega, because Omega is what, 15, 16 at the start of this?
Something like that, yeah.
And she was working for Nala Se for that whole time.
Right, even before the Bad Batch was created or whatever, or grown
she
or
was
whatever.
There
yeah.
when they were
She was
grown.
there when they were grown, right? So yeah, this is confusing. Oh, also, when are we gonna get a flashback of when they're like kids? Like, I want to see like a flashback of all of them as like young Bobas. Like,
maybe we'll get a comic. I don't know.
that would be so funny. Anyway, sorry, moving on.
Let's move on.
Section 2. Omega delivers the blood samples to Nala Se in the laboratory. Nala Se discards her blood samples into the trash and advises Omega to keep it a secret for safety. Nala Se informs Omega that she was brought to Mount Tantiss by the Empire to ensure her compliance in their quest for a genetic M-count reproduction. Distinct from the clone trooper program. Hemlock interrupts them and requests Nalise's presence at a heavily guarded vault while Omega stays behind to complete tasks.
Yes, let's talk about Nalise being a sneaky bitch.
I kind of love that she's doing this. Also, she clearly already knows that Omega has what I'm assuming
Oh,
at
she
this point is a
100%
high
knows.
M count, right?
So we'll get to it when we get to, like, again, really later episodes, because they will explain
Explain
this.
it better, yeah.
That it's not that Omega is force sensitive.
Right.
It is that the cloning process that created Omega was the only thing, like her blood is the only thing, it contains a certain mutation that allows, it acts as a binder for midichlorians, basically. And the
Okay.
issue that the Empire's running into, and spoilers for Star Wars overall, they will never figure out, is when they clone somebody, they can't bring the midichlorian count over with them. They can't bring the M count, which is what they're using to measure force sensitivity. So
Right.
they can't transfer the force between clones. And they're trying to figure out how to transfer the force from one clone body to another, because I wonder who they're trying to make clones of.
Your guess is as good as mine. I don't
My,
think they've hinted at
I don't think
anything
they've
remotely
hinted
like
it.
that in Star Wars at all ever. So who knows
Yes.
who it could be.
Anyway, they're trying to do this somehow,
Right.
so someone can return. That's what they're attempting to do. And but yeah, Nalise has to know that she either has to know that Omega's blood can do this, or she has to just not want to take the chance that Omega actually. But then she's talking in season 1 about, like, she's talking with Lama Su about how they need to get, like, the Omega back because Omega's so important.
Right.
But then that turns out that it's because she's an unaltered clone of Jango Fett and they need her to make more clone troopers. So maybe she didn't know that Omega's blood and she just didn't want her to be tested generally, just in case.
I'm thinking, like, yeah, if you compare back to season 1, I think the reason why Omega is so special to begin with is, you're right, she's unaltered, meaning because Jango Fett is dead by this point, if they want to continue the cloning process, they need to collect samples from Omega's blood to recreate the clones in a quality of way. Like they can't be bad quality.
Once again, Lama Su, I must stress how stupid you are in the first season, because Boba Fett is right there.
I don't
You know
understand
him.
why they didn't just go
Pay
after
him a lot of money,
Right.
and he will do it.
Right. Yeah, because I'm wondering, like, it would have just made their lives so much
He
easier.
is a bounty hunter.
Yeah.
Pay him money. Where is he? He has not been in, spoilers for the season. We're on, like, episode 12, and he has not shown up.
Yeah.
Or really even been mentioned, which is weird because Asajj Ventress knows him.
That's true.
She's
But when was the
worked
last
with him
time they
before.
hung out, though? Like,
He tried to kill her in Dark Disciple. I
Okay.
think he tried to kill her, or they
oh,
tried to
that's
kill
right.
Dooku.
They were at
and it didn't-
they were at the table with the other bounty hunters, right?
Well,
And
because
then-
his gang is in Dark Disciple, and I think they
Right.
go after Dooku.
right.
And that was the last interaction that I think Boba and Asajj Ventress had.
I mean, I guess I have to read Dark Disciple again, but
I guess I have to read Dark Disciple
oh
again.
no, like,
Oh no, how horrible.
what a chore.
I gotta get the audiobook and listen to Mark
Right.
Thompson narrate
Perfectly, yeah.
the perfectly Dark Disciple. How awful of me, whatever. Anyway, that's what they're attempting to do.
Right.
I do think that this scene also hits much differently after episode 11, when we know what's in the vault.
Right, because by this point they still are being cagey about what's inside the vault.
What's
So
in the
technically
vault?
we don't know. Like, we're like, what is in there? I don't know.
Remember who's in charge of the vault at this point?
Right.
It's Nalise. Nalise's such an interesting character.
Yeah, it's weird because, like, on the one hand, she's trying to not be bad, but, like, also she has no choice. But it's like she's doing things against her will, but also kind of like, well, I only care if I have a personal connection, kind of thing. Like, it's weird. She's a very complicated character.
She's very complicated. And yeah, also she talks about wanting to, like, protect the kids, but then she's trying to protect Omega, but then she's also, like, doing her evil science still, and there's a lot going on with her. I love her. Well, again, later on in the season, we'll have more to say about her. But in this moment, it's very interesting how hard she's trying to keep Omega out of the vault, now that we know what's in the vault.
Right.
And why she wouldn't want Omega to go in there. My final note for this scene is I love the touch that Hemlock keeps touching his gloved hand. I know I mentioned it last season. I continue to love it. Hemlock might quickly be becoming one of my favorite Star Wars villains to actively despise.
Oh, okay.
And this is not just because he's based on a real guy who I also despise with every fiber of my being for being a fucking monster and a war criminal and a genuine piece of shit, who I'm glad died horribly and in fear and pain because he sucked that bad. Anyway, Hemlock's based on that guy. So part of it is my hatred for that guy being
Right.
transferred to the character based on him, but also they've worked so hard to make Hemlock suck so bad. But also he clearly has like these like weird tics to him, like where he's the way he speaks, the way he's touching his hand, almost like he has like blood on his hand that he's trying to like Lady Macbeth style wipe off. Really good. I hate this fucker. I hope he becomes a classroom skeleton.
I have a theory he's just gonna blow up by the end of the season.
I also think he's just gonna blow
That's all
up.
that's gonna happen.
Or he's gonna get executed.
Right.
That would be the coward's way out, but you know, I'll also take that if they just shoot him blasters.
Maybe Batcher will eat him or something.
Maybe Basher will eat him. Look, I know this is a kid show, and spoilers for
Sure.
the season, we're supposed to like Batcher. But if Batcher eats Hemlock, I'm cool with that. That makes me like Batcher more.
I could also see them, we're about to get into it, the other Lurka hounds could somehow, some way, like find
Oh,
him
he
and
gets fucking
corner him
ripped
at
apart
once.
by his
Yep,
hounds.
by his hounds,
He,
yeah.
he pulls some like Mason Verger shit and gets eaten by his hounds.
I think that would be
God, I
pretty
gotta rewatch
just.
that
That would be a
movie.
pretty good like karmic justice. Like I think that would be a good one.
It would. Not the movie, not the show.
Section 3. Omega continues her tasks for the day, during which Omega serves biscuits to Lurka hounds being kept in cages. Omega tends to her favorite Lurka, which she named Batcher, who rejects the pet biscuits but eats when Omega shares her own food. Later, Omega visits Crosshair in his cell, and after a warning about the dangers of escape from Crosshair, she resolves a way to leave Mount Tantiss. Omega marks another day in her cell and uses straw she took from the Lurka cages to make a makeshift Tuca doll.
These dogs are called Lurka hounds. According to Wikipedia, shout out Wikipedia, they have not appeared in anything else that I could find.
I figured as much when I saw them the first time. I was like, they look vaguely like other hounds, but I feel like they're just slightly
They
different
kind of
enough.
look like the Mastiffs, and we saw the Empire use Mastiffs on Darrow, but they have not, they have been mentioned in the episode Metamorphosis, but they have not physically appeared until this moment. So they're completely new, created for this show.
Cool.
Speaking of Batcher, Bradley, do you remember how I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that we would be bringing up D. Bradley Baker again?
You did. And I was so curious why.
You were so curious as to why this was. D. Bradley Baker is the voice of Batcher.
That cracks me the fuck up, honestly.
He literally continues to voice every member of the Bad Batch except Omega.
I was like,
Down to the fucking dog.
just do you know what? Now they have a dog. Let's can you do the voice for the dog too? Oh yeah, I can do that. That's fine.
Well, apparently this is a thing for voice actors, and D. Bradley Baker is apparently really good at it. Is you can make a bunch of money as a voice actor if you can do animal noises.
I bet.
And he's really good at doing animal noises. So they got him in the booth. That's not a real dog. That's D. Bradley Baker doing that with his face, which is incredible. This man has so much goddamn range. Every time I watch Young Jedi Adventures, I'm just like, there's no fucking way that the same guy who voices Crosshair voices Nubs.
I don't believe it sometimes.
And yet, it's the same man, and his 679 as of recording acting credits, which is insane.
That man's crazy.
Also, speaking of people who are crazy, the fucking Kiners music, and it's all three Kiners, right? It's both the dad and the son and the daughter, all contributed music to this.
Oh, cool.
Which is incredible.
Take your kid to work day all the time.
Well, it is. Well, because the three of them have been making music in like, it's usually the dad or all three of them or the two kids together.
Right.
Will do the music for something. They've been doing it since back in the Clone Wars, but they're absolutely incredible. And it's all three of them in this season doing the music. Also, shout out to Dina Kiner for this being the Bad Batch, being the first credit that she has received since she transitioned.
Oh, okay.
And this is the first time she's being credited as Dina.
So
that is rad. As I think, as far as this is either the first credit or this is the first Star Wars credit. This is the first time where she's being credited with her name.
Got it. I like that.
Yeah, which is awesome. So shout out to the credits of this show. But it's all three Kiners and they're being rad. The only note I had for the real Crosshair scene was that we can kind of see that his hand is trembling already.
Right. This is the first hint right here. Yeah.
This is the first hint right here that his hand is trembling already. Now, I was going to count, Bradley, every
Okay.
single scratch that Omega makes.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to, because thankfully, StarWars.com's trivia guide, which I remembered to check this time,
Did it for you?
told me how many days it was.
All right.
In
Give it
the
to us.
opening half of the episode, Omega has been on Tantiss for 21 days, so a little shy of a month.
Okay.
She's been there about 3 weeks. In the second half of the episode, she has been there 164 days, which is a little over 5 months. It's 5.3 months. So about 5 months and about a week is how long she's been doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Wow.
Thank you, StarWars.com Trivia Guide, for just saying that. It's
I
very
love that.
useful.
Section 4. After much time has passed, Omega observes the daily routine of blood sample collection by Emery and subsequent disposal by Nala Se, all while planning her escape and being escorted by Emery through the facility. Later at the kennels, Omega discovers Batcher injured and manages to convince Batcher to let her treat the wound using a first aid kit. Later, Omega recounts her attempt to help Batcher to Crosshair, who advises her to prioritize escape over lost causes, and warns her against risking anything for him, asserting that he belongs in captivity.
So, this is not in my notes. I just thought of it as you were reading, and maybe it's the fact that I've been reading a. So, this is not in my notes. It just occurred to me as you were reading, and maybe it's the fact that I've just been. One, I was rereading Dracula, my favorite novel, and now
Of
I'm
course.
listening to a podcast adaptation of Dracula called Re-Dracula, which is quite excellent. It's just a slightly abridged audio book version of the novel, is really what it is, but it's very good. And I'm reading some other Dracula adaptations or tie-ins at the moment. I'm obsessed with the idea that the Empire is literally draining these people's blood.
Yeah, because my thought process in this whole thing, because they keep doing the thing where they're like, oh, we're doing it again. Oh, we're doing it again. I'm like, if the test didn't work one time for someone, why would you keep doing the test over and over with random clones? Like, I'm like, don't ever use that clone again, because clearly it doesn't work with their blood. So why would she keep taking Omegas? Why
Well,
would she
they're
keep taking
testing the
everybody else's?
clones, and then they're spoilers for the season. They're testing the clones, and then they're turning them into CX troopers. Seems to be what's going on here.
Gotcha.
Because we know that the CX trooper, we know there's a re-education program. We know that clone commandos, because of Scorch, who is there, and because we'll see Wolf later, we do know that some clones are still working for the Empire. So they're not testing them, they're testing them a few times to make sure, confirm the results, because that's good science. But I just find it interesting, the fact that indirectly they're taking these clones and they're literally draining the blood out of them to try to preserve the Emperor's life. That's clearly the point of this. They don't explicitly say, oh,
Right.
they're trying to clone the Emperor, but it's really obvious they're trying to clone the Emperor. Then I'm obsessed with the idea that they're trying to drain his blood in order to prolong the Emperor's life.
My other
I'm
thing, yeah,
obsessed with that idea.
because every time they show the blood machine or whatever, they show it drop a little bit of I'm assuming the Emperor's blood into their blood or something.
It's some
And,
sort of blood that they're trying to do to test the M count binding.
right.
It's I think it's
Oh, now that I
maybe.
think about it, it's not the Emperor's
You
blood
know
that
who
they're
would
testing.
know? Actually, you know who would know? You know who I'm gonna need to convince to watch this episode and can maybe tell me what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
My friend Jordan,
Oh,
the artist who does the Beach House covers and who did our official artwork.
right.
She's a laboratory technician. She
Yeah,
works
maybe
in a
she
lab.
knows
In a lab, she probably knows what the fuck. You know what? I'm gonna make a note here. I'm gonna
for
note
the.
it in my sticky note. I'm gonna get Jordan to watch this episode.
Okay.
Get Jordan to watch Confined. I'm going to try to talk Jordan into watching at least these scenes, and see if she can tell me what the fuck is this test is that they're
Right.
attempting to do.
Right. Maybe she'll know. I think I have a theory, but I don't. I mean, I guess maybe we'll wait until we find out what's in the vault to talk about it, because I feel like that's where the blood's coming from.
Yes. Well, we'll get to it. I'm hoping Jordan
Yeah.
will at least explain to me what this machine is.
Gotcha.
Anyway, on to my actual notes that I wrote down, because I'm a good podcaster who doesn't just find opportunities to talk about his favorite
Sure.
pieces of media all of the time. I definitely did not shoehorn the anime monster into every single Visions episode purely because it's my favorite anime. I love how many internal rhymes are in this episode.
Okay.
Things that are constantly calling back to each other, like the dripping faucet
Right.
continuing to call back, or the fact that Omega looks at Crosshair in the opening, 3 weeks in, but 5 months in, she's no longer looking directly at him. But the
Right.
shots are exactly the same.
Yes, that was so good. Actually, you're right. Yeah, once she's gone through the routine so many times, like she no longer bothers to look up at Crosshair because it's just like part of the day. Like it's not even she's almost given up.
She wants to make it look like she's given up because we see later that she goes and talks to Crosshair and she very much has not given up. She's getting smarter. She's getting
Mm,
more independent. The first two seasons it was very her and all of her uncles
right,
raising her. And
right.
now, not that she wasn't independent and learning these skills and things, but she was still a child, a very young child, especially in the first season. And now she's becoming a teenager. She's becoming much more self actualized in a way that she wasn't. And part of this time skip and showing what she's been through in Tantiss is showing how she had to rely on herself in Tantiss. She couldn't rely on anyone to take care of her, not even Nala Se. I love that. I love how much this episode does with so little.
Yeah, because
It's
on the
so good.
surface, it's like if you think about it, it's just a very like basic episode. Like there's not much that happens in this episode. Like it's very kind of quick stuff, but it's a lot if you
It's
really
so
deep down.
much.
Yeah.
There's so much, especially now that we know like what's going on with the season
Hmm.
and how shit's getting crazy. And we still have 3 episodes to go to watch. So maybe when I'm QAing this episode, I'll already be like, well, that was fucking wrong, and you should have talked about all of this. I have a really fucked up theory for what's in those pods that I don't think the show's gonna do. But if it does, my jaw will be on the floor.
Well, then now
If
you're gonna have to
if
be like,
I'm
well,
if
in the
I'm right.
first episode, I was right because
If
I
I'm
mentioned
right,
it.
I hope I'm wrong because it's real fucked up. But I would not put it past Hemlock to do something like that.
I only had two little notes for this little bit. One was Omega grabs the med pack or whatever on the wall to treat Batcher. The
Yes.
Arabesh text on the front of the thing says first aid. That was the
Nice.
only thing.
I do find it really interesting that the droid that they have to take care of the Lurka hounds
Hmm.
does not have medical programming, does not have any first aid programming at all. Because
Right.
I think that shows not only the Imperial mentality of why would we want to provide any sort of help to broken assets, but specifically the Hemlock mentality.
Right. Yeah, because I think he's just a security droid because it says his designation is K9
Yeah.
and K2SO it's the
Oh
same
my
thing,
god,
just
his
slightly different.
security. Hold on, shut up, shut up. The security droid whose job it is to take care of the dogs
Right.
is named K9.
Oh, I just realized that too.
Oh my god, oh my god, why? Why?
Because Jennifer Corbett is a monster and
Because Jennifer Corbett is a
she's gone
horrible person.
crazy.
It's a horrible person
She's
who's
gone
gone
mad
mad
with
with
power
power
this
and needs to
season. Yep.
stop. That is
That's
Jennifer
hilarious.
Corbett. I applaud you. I didn't think a Star Wars name could shock me anymore,
Right.
horrify me to my core, but you have pulled it off.
Well, there you
Right?
go.
This is the most horrifying thing you have done in the Bad Batch. Not any of the experimentations, not any of the horrible stuff that happens to children. It's specifically the writing decision to name the droid that watches the dogs K9. I hate this show. I hate this show. But yeah, you're right. It is just a security droid. But I think that's interesting. I think that's
My,
interesting and it's worth noting.
my last note is in the Crosshair scene. This is the first time in the entire series that Crosshair says Omega's name.
I'm going to continue to spoil my opinion of the rest of the season. This dynamic between Omega and Crosshair, we haven't had it since episode 1 and then a little bit in the finale of season 1.
Right.
This is the emotional backbone of the entire season. It starts with this episode and it never lets up.
Their connection is just so different than her connection with the rest of the bat. And it's very obvious, like starting in this episode. Because they have a similar trauma,
They do.
they trauma bond.
They literally trauma bond. This episode is about Omega and Crosshair trauma bonding. And I wrote down, I was writing down the good lines from this scene, and then I stopped because I was just writing down every single line.
Right.
Like when he asks her, what is your primary objective? And it shows that his mentality remains that of a soldier. And one of the whole journeys that they go on is Omega kind of showing him that, like, no, you can be a good soldier, but you can also be a good person at the same time. Like, you don't have to just follow orders because they're wrong. You can keep your sense of morality. You are not just an instrument the way the Empire and Hemlock thinks of these clones, and in fact, everyone as instruments, as tools to use. That we see Hemlock doing it with the CX troopers. We see him doing it in this episode with the Lurka Hounds. And Omega saying, no, Crosshair, you have value beyond being a tool. You have value beyond being this instrument. And then on top of that, Hemlock will mention later on that, like, Crosshair's been resisting the re-education. So, like, that rebellion is in him. That desire to not just be a tool anymore is in him because of everything he went through into the first season and the second season. I hate this show. I hate this show. I say this deep affection in my heart. I hate how good this show is sometimes. Anyway, please continue.
Section 5. During a surprise inspection of her cell, Omega tries to conceal her Tuca doll, but is confiscated by Emery, who assures Omega that it will be disposed of as per regulation before taking her away for work. Meanwhile, Hemlock expresses dissatisfaction to Nala Se over the testing and warns of consequences, including revisiting Omega's privileges if they fail to match the specimen's M count. Hemlock cautions about the Emperor's impatience.
I only really have 3 notes here for these 2 scenes. The first is that Emery Carr is going to have her own little character arc over the course of this season. And in this scene, we really do see that she has super drunk the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Not specifically the Empire's Kool-Aid, but Hemlock's Kool-Aid.
Right. He's taught her at least, like, this is just how things are. And then she just accepts them. And then she's just like, yep, that's how it is. Like, because
that's how it is.
Whatever he says is what it is. Like, yeah.
It's going back to that continual theme of, like, you know, can one person have the power to make things better? Can one person have the power within an institutional system, even if the system is functionally broken and needs to be dismantled and destroyed? What is the effect that one person within that system can have on the people around them? And we will see it when we get to Identity Crisis. Basically, all of the Tantiss episodes expect me to go fucking insane over. And they're going to be super long episodes because I have a lot to say about this. But I do think it goes back, and that's Emery's journey over this, and that's Nala Se and her when they have that conversation, you know, in the later episodes. I'm trying to stop referencing later episodes,
right,
but I can't because it all works together so effectively. When they have their conversation, and Nala Se is basically like, yeah, I was doing for those kids everything that I could do. It's crazy. My second note is Hemlock sucks with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 U's in the sucks because he is threatening Omega to get at Nala Se. Put a pin in that. We'll come back to it in the next scene. However, he is also right. She is sabotaging the project.
Right.
She is refusing to test Omega's blood. So he's not wrong that she's not 100% dedicated.
Right. And also, like, theoretically, had she had allowed them to test Omega's blood months ago, because she's been avoiding it for at least 6 months, like, they might not have had, like, all these issues, or, like, there might not be a need to go after Omega if, like, because it would have already been solved by now, basically, the problem that they're having.
That's the gray area with Nala Se, because she is deliberately sabotaging this project, but she is not deliberately sabotaging this project because the project is morally wrong. She's deliberately sabotaging the project to protect this one person that she cares about.
Right.
It has nothing, it goes all the way back literally to Aftermath when she lets Omega go. Nala Se cares about Omega more than anything else in the galaxy, and she is willing to throw Lamasu and the other Kaminoans under the bus to protect Omega, and now she is throwing Hemlock and Project under the bus. Spoilers for episode 3, this is Project. She's throwing the whole thing under the bus to protect Omega, and I think that's really interesting. My final note, didn't write it down, but I decided to bring it up anyway. I do love the little callback to Return of the Jedi. We'll see if the Emperor is as understanding as I am.
Right.
Where Vader, it's a callback to Return of the Jedi.
Right.
The Emperor is not as forgiving as I am. I last saw it when I went to the Hollywood Bowl and watched it in concert.
Maybe you can just watch it during the marathon.
I could if I was insane. Well, I talked about, like, maybe going and watching the original trilogy Like I thought about like maybe
You
I'll
can do
go and
that at
watch the
home on
original
Disney Plus.
trilogy.
So what's the
That was
point?
what I ended up landing on. Is I was like, I can do that at home.
Yeah, honestly, here's the thing. I'm going to go to the theater to see Phantom Menace only for the experience of seeing it in the theater again. However, on a normal day, I'm going to spend, like, if I want to watch Phantom Menace, I can do it at home any day of the week I
Exactly.
want to. That's the
That's the thing with
brilliance of Disney Plus.
yeah. Well, that's what, not to tangent too much into Disney Plus, that's kind of what the appeal of Disney Plus is.
Right.
Like, and I think that they've done some interesting things with the business model for Disney Plus, where they have kind of figured out that the original draw of Disney Plus was having a library of Disney stuff, Disney branded stuff. And I think the move to combine it with Hulu has been which is more original programming. People don't subscribe to Disney Plus because they want to watch shows on Disney Plus that are airing on Disney Plus. Maybe they will, but generally that's not why they do it. The main people who are subscribing to Disney Plus are parents with kids who want to watch Frozen 18 times.
Right.
And you can just load it up on Disney Plus anytime you want. And then whenever they become obsessed with, something else, when they become obsessed with Big Hero 6, you can load up Big Hero 6.
Right.
On Disney Plus over and over and over again. Hulu is doing more of the like shows are actually coming out on Hulu and you watch them there. I love the move to combine the two. I think it's great. But
Yeah, I
then you
think
do
they're
have
going to do that.
they already have. If you load up Disney Plus, you'll get like Hulu shows
Yeah.
on there.
I mean, like, I think what they're going to end up doing is like just altogether, they're going to get rid of the Hulu separately, and then it'll just be a Disney Plus
I have
combo.
thought about that. I think the Hulu branding is too strong. I think
mean,
that's what the issue.
I would
And
have
I
said
think
that
they
about
also
HBO though, so
well, I also think, HBO is currently being run by a goddamn moron who doesn't know
right.
what he's doing.
That's very true.
And Disney's being run by Bob Iger. And for all my criticisms of Bob Iger, he does know what he's doing.
Sure.
I think the power of the Hulu brand is too strong. And I think that Disney needs to keep their sort of Disney branded wholesome kid stuff separated from Shogun.
Sure. But
Right.
I kind of like having them both on there.
I do like having them both on one thing, but as far as the branding goes, these are two very different things. Shogun's not the kind of show that you're going to put on Disney Plus. It's the kind
Right.
of show you're going to put on Hulu.
And you know what's funny is that you say that, and honestly, I go to the Hulu app to watch Shogun. I don't watch it on Disney Plus app. I literally make a point to go to the Hulu app to
Well,
watch. all
I
that Hulu
also
stuff.
watch
Yeah.
things on the Hulu app as
Yeah.
opposed to on
It's so
the
weird.
Disney
Even
Plus
though I
app.
can just watch it all on Disney Plus, I just go to the Hulu app to watch. I don't know why. It's just
But I think it's an
insane.
exercise in branding. We have now tangented.
Sorry, we're going back. Anything else?
We're coming back. I don't have anything else on this sequence,
Moving
so
on.
we can move on to the next one.
Final scene. Section 6. Omega discovers that Batcher is slated for termination due to her domesticated behavior being deemed a liability, leading to a confrontation with K9X1. Omega snatches a datapad to incapacitate the droid by causing a cage to fall on him. She then frees Batcher by unlocking her kennel's external chute and removing her control collar, allowing Batcher to run free. Omega is confronted by Dr. Hemlock and Emery, where she defends her actions in releasing Batcher, but Hemlock dismisses her idealism, claiming that Omega's actions made Batcher vulnerable. Emery tries to intervene, but Omega confronts Hemlock about her status as a hostage to control Nala Se, leading to Hemlock to warn her about how her misbehavior will jeopardize Crosshair's safety, and threatens termination if it persists. Later, Omega sulks in her cell, but receives her Tuca doll back from Emery. Alone, she hears Batcher howling in the distance outside.
Yeah, so Omega getting Batcher slated for termination by being nice is not only super fucked up, but it's also like Hemlock's thing.
He was so, like, when he says, he's like, wow, I didn't know how cruel you were. Like, that you domesticated a dog. Like,
Royce Hemlock, that is a fucking child.
I know,
Why
it's so
the fuck would
good.
you say that to her?
He's like, you fucked her life up because you just ruined her. Like, she was a wild animal, and now she's a domesticated dog. She can't defend herself now.
It's some bizarrely fucked up psychological
Reverse psychology
fucking
bullshit.
shit
Yeah, it's crazy.
to heap on a child in this show.
So good.
It is. I was stunned the first time I watched this episode because I was like, it's such a classic like abuse tactic to be like, well, you did this. It's your fault. You're the one. And it's not even like Hemlock saying it directly. He does. But it's also the fact that it is literally built into the system that he created, that if these Lurkahounds become too domesticated, they go down.
Right.
It's not even him directly giving the order. He set up the system and is letting it run. And it goes back to that medical droid that we saw, or that security droid that's like, I'm not a medical droid. It's all built into the system. Hemlock is the villain here, but in a lot of ways, the Imperial system and the Imperial mentality is every bit the villain of this season that he is, which I think is neat. And his whole thing, too, is threatening people to get at other people. Because remember, I said, put a pen in the pack that he goes to Nala Sane's like, well, we'll have to take away Omega's privileges if you don't cooperate. He literally does the same shit to Omega. He's like, well, I've got Crosshair, so behave. Right. And you just know that if he knew about the Crosshair and Omega conversation, he'd pull the same fucking shit with Crosshair. He would be like, well, if you don't submit to the re-education, we're going to have to, dispose of Omega.
What I like, though, that is what this reveals is that Hemlock can see everything. He knows everything that's going on. There's no secrets on Mount Tantiss. Like, he just knows. He
doesn't know that Omega and Crosshair are talking to each other. That's the one thing he doesn't know. But yes, he knows basically everything happening on Tantiss.
Then why would he threaten Crosshair if he doesn't know they're talking?
Oh, fuck, you're right. You're right. I'm wrong.
I was like, this is no, the only thing he doesn't know is that Nala Se is not destroying the blood samples.
He only suspects that, but yeah.
Right. He doesn't know for sure, but I mean, I feel like he probably can figure it out though. Like there's no security cameras in the laboratory like you're telling me.
There probably isn't. Is the thing. There's probably cameras everywhere except the sensitive, because they don't want that. I guess they don't want the security recordings of that data.
I mean, what does it matter anyway?
You know what that probably is? It's probably not. It's probably not that there's security. That there's no security cameras, but that there's blind spots.
Okay, so you're right. You're right. Maybe the trash somehow is a blind spot.
The doors are probably covered, but the monitors themselves are not. It's a safeguard in place. So like if the security footage from Tantiss is leaked,
sure,
nobody's going to be able to see what they're actually doing on Tantiss. That's what. If I were Dr. Hemlock, that's how I would set it up. Is I would cover everything except the data. I would prevent the screens from being able to be seen. My next note is LMAO get crated.
Oh, the crate falling on the droid. I was like, what are you talking about?
But I do want to note that, again, with the setups and payoffs in this season, we set up here Batcher's escape via the tunnels.
Right.
We're going to use those same tunnels in 3 episodes to escape. And then my final note for this episode, my final, at long last, note of this episode. Actually, I do need to note that I have a third Hemlock sex note with 14 U's, I counted. But my final, actual for real final note of this episode is Imri giving the doll back. That is the first step in her character journey that we will see later on. So I do want to note her giving the doll back to Omega as not an act of defiance of the system, but an act of maneuvering within it to try to undermine its worst aspects.
Right.
Now we are done with my notes.
Well, do you have any final thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, we talked for over an hour about 28 minutes of television.
Of a prison episode.
And I'm not counting all the stuff that we talked about at the beginning that Bradley may or may not keep in the episode.
Right. Isn't that wild? It shows how good this season.
For a bottle episode with half the main cast not there, we talked for an hour. About wild. This episode, just the episode, not counting all the other stuff.
Sure.
That's my final thought on this episode.
I'm with you. I mean, my final thought is the same. Like the fact that such a simple prison episode, of people just being confined to one location for the entire episode. They don't go anywhere. There's not multiple, places that the scenes go or anything. It's literally just different rooms in the facility. So it's not a super crazy thing. Maybe Omega's cell counts as a different one, but literally we stay in this one place with three to 4 characters.
Because I just had a thought. I think that other than the opening scene with the shuttle and the final shot of Batcher, I don't think we go outside.
No.
We have no establishing shots after the initial scene with the shuttle crashing.
Right. Because I think you see Mount Tantiss when the shuttle is crashing, but
we go outside Omega's window to look at Omega from outside of her window, but that's the furthest we get outside of Tantiss, I think, at all.
Yeah, and then you just see Batcher howling and in the wilderness, but we don't know where that is. That could be anywhere.
Yeah, and that's the end of the episode, is where finally somebody is free of Mount Tantiss.
Right.
And we get this shot of them that they're finally somewhere else. God, this episode was so good.
I mean, we were confined to this
I hate
setting.
I hate how good this episode is, and I also hate that there's going to be episodes that are even better
It's wild.
in this season. It's crazy. It's
It gives me hope for
absolutely
the rest of
fucking
the
crazy.
season that I haven't seen yet, so I'm really
Yes. We either,
hopeful.
yeah, we definitely saw that finale and either really loved it or didn't. Pick
Right.
whichever one is applicable. Well, all right. What are we doing next week, Bradley?
Next week we're doing episode 2. I don't know the name. Hold on, let me do that again. Next
Next week,
week,
we're doing episode 2. Bradley doesn't know how to podcast after 3 years.
next week we're doing episode 2, Paths Unknown.
Exciting.
I know. I don't know what path we're going to be on because it's unknown. So that's it.
Exactly.
Who
That's
knows
the
what's going to
point of the
happen?
name. All right. Pluggables. You can find me on the Star Wars TTRPG podcast set in the High Republic for Light and Dice. You can also find gay thriller books that I write on Amazon Kindle called Beach House Studios. Second book's coming along. And I just finished like this week, either this week or over the weekend, the draft of the third book, the first draft of the third book.
Okay.
So it's coming.
It's coming along. So I'm going out of town soon for work, and I've literally forced myself, like, I'm going to, for on the plane, I'm going to finish your book, the first book, because I don't have
Okay.
access to the second one. There's no insider trading thing happening right now.
I mean, Bradley will get the second book early, listeners.
Right.
For the record, he is on the ARC list. He will get the second book early when it's ready.
However, I will finish the first one on the plane, and then I'll listen to the last Percy Jackson book, The Last Olympian or whatever. That's the two things I'm going to listen to on the plane.
Ooh.
So I'm going to do that.
Ooh. You're gonna love Last Olympian. I am fucking crazy about Last Olympian. There's some stuff in Last Olympian. I'm like, dear God. Anyway, that's
Speaking of my work,
speaking of your work, where you're flying
right,
to do. We can't say where.
right.
But
But
speaking
the
of the
last thing
plane
I
you'll
did,
be on, speaking of the plane you'll be on, the last thing that Bradley did, he didn't have to get on a plane because if you're just joining us, Bradley does a bunch of reality TV show, working in production offices and things. We always promote whatever the last show he did is, and now currently we are promoting The Circle on Netflix, season currently airing.
I don't remember.
I
which
still
one.
need to watch that. It actually sounds intriguing enough that I do want to watch that one.
Whatever
So,
the current season is that's on Netflix right now, that's the one.
as of this episode coming out, whatever the current season of The Circle is, Bradley
Right.
worked on that.
There you go.
Alrighty, well, Bradley, go ahead and, rather like a lurker-hound running desperately away from Mount Tantiss, let's run away from this episode by you running the socials. Thank you for listening to this episode of Gold Squadron Gaze. Did Charles fuck something up? Email us at goldsquadrongaze@gmail.com to let us know. You can also find us on Twitter at GoldSquadGaze, and you can find us on TikTok and Instagram at GoldSquadronGaze. You can also find us on YouTube at our Gold Squadron Gaze YouTube channel, where we post full episodes of this show. Finally, if you liked the show, don't forget to rate us and give us a review on your favorite podcast platform. That allows other people to find our show. As always, thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gaze, and we'll see you next week. I like how we've settled into this utterly pointless groove of me saying my backup audio is recording and then you saying your backup audio is recording and then you hit the record button on Zoom.
You know, it's weird because I've listened to another podcast where they literally have to do it at the same time, where they go like they both just do it whenever they start, and then they clap at the same time. So
That's
they
Dark
sync
Side
it up.
Divas. That's
Oh,
Dark
okay.
Side Divas. That's their whole thing. That's a running joke.
I'm
is
like,
they
we definitely
they
don't
do the clap.
that
We
because
definitely
we don't
don't
need
do
to
the
because we're so professional, I guess. And I never.
We're
use
just
backup
so
audio,
good that we remember. No, it's because we use the single audio track.
Exactly, because I'm lazy.